ahead and introduce yourself?
Great, yes. Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Mary, and I met most of you probably at the annual training. Thank you for coming, and thanks for your follow-up. And my role is logistical, but more showing and sharing the research that's related to why text messaging can have such a huge impact on your families. So thank you again for attending.
All right, does someone else want to go ahead and introduce themselves?
Sure, this is Jordan Marsh from the South Sound YMCA. I'm representing Briggs, and I'm doing this webinar because I think it's a great way to communicate with our ACT members.
Thanks, Jordan.
Hi, good morning. I'm Caroline from Monroe.
Hey, Caroline. Thanks for
Good morning. This is Thomas Russell from the downtown Seattle YMCA.
Good morning. This is Peggy Morris from Everett and Mill Creek, and I don't know anything about this text messaging, so I'm here to find out.
Great, thanks, Peggy.
This is Hayden from the University Y, and I know a bit about it, so I'm happy for the refresher.
Hayden.
I'm Robin Bueller from the North Shore Bothell YMCA. I'm from Dale Turner YMCA. About it.
I'm sorry, we didn't catch who just introduced themselves. It broke up a little bit.
Hi, I'm Margaret from Dale Turner YMCA.
Oh, great. Thanks, Margaret. We can hear you now.
This is Katrina from the Bellevue Y.
Katrina. All right. I'm also seeing Martin from Yakima on the line. I don't know, maybe having some challenges with the audio piece, but welcome, Martin. I'm glad you can join us today. And then maybe a few other folks are coming online as well. Does anybody else need to introduce themselves? Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and just move along into the program and welcome everybody. It's great to see such a diverse group represented in terms of different areas in our community. So thank you for being with us today. Just one other logistical piece. Can I, we will use a PowerPoint for this presentation today, and so I just want to know if you cannot see my screen, can you please let us know right now in the chat box that you cannot see the screen?
I can tell you right now that I can't access the web page. It's saying the web page is not available.
Okay. Thanks, Thomas. Is anybody else having issues being able to see the screen?
This is Peggy. I've got all these things here, and I don't know how to. I'm on my computer. I've got the GoToMeeting control panel and the ACT program text messaging, but I don't know how to get to the screen. Do I go up to the Zoom or the webcam?
So usually you would hit the link, the URL link, and then you can see the screen.
I don't see where it says URL screen. I'm totally new to all of this.
Okay, thanks, Peggy. So Peggy and Thomas are having some challenges. Is anybody else not able to see the screen?
Yes, Jordan from Briggs YMCA. I can't even access the web page.
Okay. Can anybody see the web page?
Yeah,
this is Katrina. I can see it.
Okay.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay.
But is there what am I supposed to do to get there? Is my question.
And you know, Peggy, I wish I could be more of a support. I'm not entirely sure, but what I can do is we can go along in the text messaging program and try to just enunciate where to find these locations, and I can send you the recording and the PowerPoint after our call today. But we really, I'm sorry that you're having the difficult.
Wait a minute. I'm finding it. I'm just fiddling around here. I don't know how to do all of this.
Okay. Peggy, I think you opened the webcam, so I'm going to cancel you out because we can see you. But
Oh yeah, I opened the webcam, so you don't see me.
okay. All right. Well, we're going to charge forward, and I'm really apologizing for those who are having technical difficulties. But what we can do is make sure that you get access to this recording after the call today. All right. So, okay, I must have misspoken. Thomas can see, so it looks like just Jordan and Peggy are having challenges.
Yeah, but I don't know how I get to it. That's my question.
So, Peggy, on the invitation that I sent out in the email, there's a link, and so you want to click that link. And so we're going to move on because we already have just 50 minutes left for our webinar today. So the way that this is going to work is Mary and I are going to tag team going through the slides. And if you have any questions, please use the chat box in the right-hand side to type your questions to us so that we can table them for the end of the webinar, or we can address them in the moment if that's needed. So please use the chat bar to comment questions. And if you need to mute yourself because you have a lot of noise happening in the space that you're in, please hit *6. And you can hit #6 to come back into the conference. So if to mute yourself, you hit *6, and to come back, you hit #6. Okay? So we are going to go ahead and launch into the presentation. So again, this is really a resource that will help support putting the additional continued support of the ACT program in the very hands of your participants. So we'll move forward with figuring out how to do that. So as we mentioned at the training, either if it was the training you went to a couple weeks ago or the initial ACT facilitator training you attended, the purpose of implementing text messages is kind of there's a few different reasons why we've implemented text messaging or are encouraging you to implement text messaging in your branches. We have had a lot of different iterations of the program since its inception 10 years ago, and the most current version is shortened. We used to have twice-a-week meetings for the ACT program, and so knowing that we have less time with participants in the current model, this text messaging service offers a really great way for us to continue to provide that support even outside of that weekly meeting. Text messaging is generally a pretty low-cost, feasible, and sustainable way for us to continue to communicate with participants. It's also just very much the culture we live in. So there's not a lot of other ways we can have instantaneous communication that reaches people wherever they are, but text messaging provides that platform. And again, the research and the pieces that Mary will talk more about show that this is really a helpful way to support behavior change. And so we see that in terms of evidence. And so that's one of the other reasons why we support text messaging in this program. You can see that the text messages themselves are meant to be in true text fashion. They're not long, lengthy essays, but just little nuggets of information that are encouraging or reflective or informative. And so you can see kind of how we've created the messages to be tailored to the audience. So if a parent were to be receiving a text message, they might receive a text saying, improve nutrition and encourage smart eating habits, getting kids involved. This helps prepare them to make good decisions on their own. Mealtime habits you can create now can lead to a lifetime of healthier choices. So kind of the big picture, it's aimed at communicating with the parent, the gatekeeper in the home, to kind of think about, you know, long-term habits and what will help their family, set their family up for success. Whereas a teen message, so again, knowing that we can enlist teen participants to actually receive messages, they might have a message coming across in a little bit different language, like the example here. Benefits to being active include increased confidence, increased strength and coordination. Walk proud with these feelings. So a little bit more tailored to that teen audience. And we'll talk about this as the webinar goes along, but we have created all of the messages already. So there is an existing model where you just need to implement, or you need to just input the messages for your participants based on your days of your program, but you do not need to create the messages. So this is already, the messaging is already created. What the opportunity is for you to access those messages and then to send them out to your group specifically. And so that's really what we'll talk about today. And it's not to say that you can't add to the messages or tweak them based on knowing your group, but those are the messages that we've looked at for the pilot and that we can report on the efficacy of. So again, you're really encouraged to use the messages that we've already created because they've been shown to be effective. So I'm going to go ahead and give it over to Mary to speak more about some of that pilot research or information supporting text messaging in behavior change programming.
Great, thank you, Bree. I would like to invite questions or comments via the chat, and we will have plenty of time after going through these next few slides to discuss more of any concerns or contributions you have. So feel free to type them in and we can address them after we get through some of the slides as well. So Bree mentioned the pilot study that was conducted in 2012, which was our first time utilizing text messaging in partnership with the ACT program. And this is really an evidence-based, research-driven accompaniment and adjunct to the ACT program. So I just want to give you a little feedback on what parents and teens said after they had been a part of that pilot. And I'll just go through a few of them, not every single one, because you will have a copy of this. Parents' responses included 100% would recommend the messages be used at other program sites. The parents knew that they were a pilot. Not every program, every ACT program was doing it at that time. So they would say their opinion was yes, it should be useful elsewhere. 57% were using text messages prior in other programs, so they had experience. 100% of the parents were satisfied. 71% preferred daily messages. 14% just 4 to 6 times a week, and then 14% 1 to 3 times per week. And we did have daily text messages in the original pilot. However, we are going to trim that down based on some more recent research that has recommended not having daily messages. The parents also thought it provided a connection to the program between sessions, and they also perceived a greater benefit for themselves rather than for the children. The teens independently said that they also would recommend that the messages be used at other sites. They were satisfied with the text messaging. Half of them were also neutral, and half of them found that it was helpful or very helpful, and the other half found it was somewhat helpful. They've varied in their response on how often it helps them make changes in their habits. And we will move on to the next slide related to not just the ACT program, specific to the ACT program, but a broader example actually coming out of the University of Michigan is on the next slide, 3.
Oops, sorry.
So back to the evidence. So there is actually an article, which I just love this title, it's very real. OMG, do not say LOL. I do hear, just to pause to the audience, I do hear quite a bit of feedback. Is everybody muted? And if you're not, please do by pressing #6. So there's an article titled, "Oh my God," or "OMG, do not say LOL," and it's obese adolescents' perspectives on the content of text messaging to enhance weight loss efforts. And I know sometimes people get sensitive about the word weight loss because we're not a weight loss program. However, we're working on behavior change, and so this is still an appropriate adjunct to the program. So teens preferred messages that provided recipe ideas and included successful weight loss strategies used by their peers, not necessarily an adult, by a peer, and requested feedback regarding their progress. They preferred positive and encouraging and direct messages, which are called game frame messages, being more effective. So game frame is like looking at the glass half full, rather than lost frame would be, don't do this, that's like the half empty perspective. So looking at that optimistic, positive progress type of messaging. And the teens were unanimous that the messages should include encouraging symbols or emoticons, like exclamation points and smiley faces, as often as possible. Well, that's an update that will be in the new version of the text messages as well. And they emphasized also that any mention of unhealthy foods or behaviors would trigger them to eat those foods or engage in those behaviors. And I would say that that's parallel to the conversation within your program as well. So focusing on what to do and what to incorporate rather than don't do this and don't eat this. Text messaging acronyms such as LOL were considered too informal for messages from healthcare providers. And although as a YMCA facilitator, the majority are not healthcare providers, they still look to you as a coach and an authority, as just by nature of being a facilitator of this class. So it was considered a little too informal to be using those acronyms. And then a third of the participants indicated the messages became boring over time. So research, is not black and white. Doesn't mean that everybody loves it. So we do have to incorporate that not everybody thought it was the best thing in the world, but the majority did. And then based on a particular cognitive theory called elaboration likelihood model, just big words that say this approach, text messaging, should encourage teens to engage in the mental processing, the central processing psychological work that promotes behavior change. So not only your in-person time with them and what you encourage them to do with their families, but also that, like Bree mentioned, the real culture we're in of staring at our phones a little too much and text messaging can be another seed towards positive change. Just having that encouragement there, knowing that somebody is out there that's giving them the vote of confidence, not just mom and dad or not just what they hear in the class, but that a message is coming that seems to be geared for them too, and almost feels personal. That had a big impact. And thank you. Go ahead, Bree. So this came out of the key recommendations from that pilot for future ACT sites offering text messaging. We logistically, and Bree, feel free to jump in at any time here, we recommend that you would allocate about 60 minutes initially to set up phone numbers, upload the messages, and about 5 minutes a week to check in about the messages. I think it's really important for everybody to understand the time commitment. It's really a front-loaded time commitment. So once these messages, which we have already generated for you, there's approximately 2 messages per week for parents and 2 messages per week for teens. Once those are uploaded, it really is just checking in a couple minutes, maybe 5 at the most a week, to just check, make sure that people got them, and if anybody wants to touch base on the content of those messages. So the front-loaded time is right before the program starts, having us help you upload those messages. And then we definitely, if you are offering an 8 to 11-year-old group, the kids version, we would still encourage you to do the text messaging to the parents only, but we do feel at this time developmentally that 8 to 11-year-olds wasn't impacted as much as the teens. And also, not all 8 to 11-year-olds had phones. I know it's not the case for some, but we wouldn't want to rely on them to have a phone or feel the pressure to have a phone. So if regarding families that may not have phones or where phone access is not a consistent presence, we would like to encourage you to provide these options. Like we could encourage them to look at freegovernmentcellphones.net, donation programs through corporate entities, and then also look into low-cost phones, such as the ones listed like Motorola Moto or Nokia Lumina. And some of them are retailing only at $20, and then they're pay-as-you-go as low as $5 a month. So as far as cost, children, and why definitely coming from children's, it might, is going to cover the cost of the call 'em all service. And so the cost is not coming from your branch. It's really your time investment, which again is laid out up there, an hour in the beginning at most, and then just touching base in between weeks, not separately with each participant, but at the weekly session about the text message that was sent. And it will be consistent with the take-home message of the week. So if the curriculum that week is about focusing on eating breakfast every day, something related to that concept or that behavior would be relevant to the text message of that week, or the text messages of that week, like one nutrition one physical activity one. So anything you'd like to add to that, Bree, as far as logistics or phone obtaining?
The only thing I would like to add is sometimes we talk about, the barrier of having a phone. We actually, just to add in more pieces of the research, it does show that even folks who are lower income levels still have access to phones and still have access to text messaging services. So there's very few barriers to putting this program into place. And then I think the only other thing is sometimes in completing the implementation of text messaging, sometimes people are more apt for having an email over a text, and so I would say that that's up to you to decide, how do we make sure we're including as many people as possible in getting this supportive messaging outside of the program, because the research does show that it's really supportive. So to kind of problem solve based on if you do run into any challenges, and know that myself and Mary are here to support. But I just really want to encourage you to be creative in identifying solutions, but also to know that there are really relatively few barriers to implementing this. I'm going to check our chat bar and see if we have any questions here. It looks like, okay, so Jordan can see the PowerPoint. Martin, can you hear, are you having trouble hearing myself and Mary?
I am.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry about that. I wonder if it's a volume issue. Can you turn the volume up, or is it a static issue?
The speaker, and I'm not able to hear. I'll just connect to the computer and hear you guys through there.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
Okay. All right.
And just one more comment before you move on. I want to, even as I was speaking about the research, I just want to say that the impact of this initial investment, and also us covering the cost, is really, it's like the whole program, you will have payoff for your teens and families and parents for that initial investment, because I just want to encourage you to see how powerful this can be in addition. And it might not be something that's really evident. You might not have a 14-year-old jumping up and down being like, that was the best message ever. That's probably really unlikely. However, their encouragement and that just kind of optimistic or positive connection in between sessions is an adjunct or a supportive feature that could really change outcomes at the end of the program and potentially beyond the program, which is, of course, what we'd like to do as well.
Thank you, Mary.
Sure.
All right, so we're going to move on in the presentation then. Mary set a great tone for kind of the rationale behind why this is an important service, and some of the introductions to the logistics about how to go about actually implementing it. And Peggy asked a good question that related to, how do we get people onboarded in this service? And we'll touch on that now as we kind of move into more of the logistics about the text messaging service. So this this slide really just reiterates as a summary of what we just talked about. We see in the research that text messaging reinforces class learning. It's an effective communication tool. Especially it encourages and it helps get our adolescent populations more excited about this program and some of the behavior changes that are being discussed as a function of participating in ACT. And then, it's hard to nail down whether or not it impacts attendance, but we believe that it will. And so, again, just another reason why text messaging is really important. It helps get those participants in the door, having those discussions, gaining that additional support from their group. And it just provides another platform for sharing tips and additional communication. So moving on to the logistics of ACT, we discussed earlier that the messages are pre-written for your convenience. So again, those messages do not need to be created on your end. They just need to be input on your end according to the flow of your session. So Mary discussed that the text message is related to the content of the weekly session. So you would want to do that front loading of the messages in sequence with your ACT programming. And that the messages are specific to both the adults in the group and then the teens, so that we are speaking in appropriate language for those different audiences. And again, oops, I jumped the gun on this, but they coincide with the weekly programming. So in terms of the Call 'em All service, this is the service that we've looked into a few different programs that will allow us to connect with participants via text messages. And after kind of doing some sampling, the Call 'em All service is really superior to some of the other options, not saying that any of the other options aren't feasible. In terms of implementing this on a bigger scale, we've identified that the Call 'em All service is the best program for helping onboard the majority of branches. It does have a cost associated with it, but as Mary mentioned, Children's Hospital is willing to support the cost of this program, of this service, so that that does not need to be a cost incurred at the branch level. It's really your time and just inputting the text messages that we're asking you to decide whether or not that's feasible for your branch. The Call 'em All service is an online service, and it's accessible from any computer. So you don't necessarily need it to be at the Y physically to do some of this input work. And the benefit of the Call 'em All service specifically is it allows for future scheduling. So I did see a question pop up from Peggy if this input is happening on a weekly basis. It can happen all at once in the beginning of the program. You can schedule every message for the next 3 months in the beginning. So you can schedule very far out in the future, and it holds on to those dates and times that you want that message to go out to those recipients. So that really was one of the benefits of this service that none of the other programs had, and it's a convenience factor. So your time can be consolidated to just that one time of inputting the messages, so that it's not something that it's sustainable, is what I should say. And the service itself is rather user-friendly, and in order to kind of interface with our participants, they need to opt in. So now what we're going to do is go through how you would create a text message using the Call 'em All service. And I have step-by-step directions for this in a written form, which we'll send after the webinar today. But this is meant to give you a visual idea of what the text message creation looks like. Okay, so this is the user board, or this is kind of the dashboard for the Call 'em All service. And so there's a lot of information here, and since we are just going into, this is just an introduction, I'm not going to go into all of the nuances of this Call 'em All service, but the first is talking about the SMS keyword. So this is how your participants opt in to the text messaging service. So when we create your account, after you complete the application for receiving funds from Seattle Children's to implement this text message service, we will create your account with a specific keyword, and that's still to be determined, but most likely it'll be ACT or Yakima Act or something specific to your community. And that is the word that your participants will want to text to a number. Usually it's 292929. So that keyword is how your participants opt in to the text messages. And we'll create that once we sign you on to implementing the text messaging. So that kind of answers Peggy's question, is that yes, people need to agree to receive these text messages. It's not something we can just blast out to them. It does require them completing that opt-in step of texting the keyword to that generic number. And again, feel free to use the chat bar if you have any questions of some of these logistic things as we're going through them. So that covers the, let's see here, Monica, can they opt out when they feel like it? Yes. So if anybody has received a text message where it kind of seems like it's an automated text message and it says press 2 to stop or press 1 to delete, there's always verbiage on the bottom of the text message that allows for opting out if people do choose to no longer receive the messages. Thanks, Monica. Good question. So the first thing that happens is the opt-in, and then if they need to opt out, they can opt out. But then once we have an opt-in, we have them basically set up in a system where it allows us to have their number saved in this computer system, and we can send texts as we need to these different numbers. So it creates a contact list, so to speak. So once we have our parents and our teens, we can subgroup. So you can add the parents to one group and the teens to another group so that you can make sure your text messages are going to the right places. And it all depends on the keyword. So if you're going to text your teens and your parents, we'll give you 2 keywords. You want to tell your parents the one keyword and then your teens the other keyword, and that will create those 2 separate groups for you. So once you have the groups created, and the earlier, my tip would be the earlier you can get that keyword out to people, the better. Because it's a little, as quick as it is to opt in, sometimes it takes people a few times of hearing this to actually do it. And so once you get your keyword, send it out in an email. Next time you talk to the person before the program starts, have them opt in as soon as they can, because you'll want all of your contact information input before you start creating all of your text messages, because you pre-choose who's going to receive that. And so if somebody opts in very late, you're going to have to go through and re-add them to all of your messages. So try my message, my big picture message, try to get the message out about the keywords as soon as possible, and encourage folks to take advantage of that. So moving on, after you have your contacts created and your participants opted in, you can go through and create your broadcast or your text message. Okay, great question, Peggy. So using maybe that first, either a session 0 or your orientation session to go through some of the logistical pieces of ACT, like the membership or some of those other pieces, this text messaging could be a component that's addressed right there and then when you have people as captive audience. It's a great suggestion, Peggy. So this is how we actually go about creating a text message. So you click Create Broadcast up here, and it asks you what type of broadcast you want to create. There's some other options, but the one that we'll always focus on is text only. I encourage you to do that just because it's the easiest and it's less likely to run into user difficulties. So we're going to use text only. And so you can name the broadcast. You can come up with a system if you want. We'll have the text messages assigned like week 1, message 1, week 2, message 2, or you can be specific and name them according to what the content of the message is. So you might do motivation, week 1, message 1, or something like that to keep your messages organized. So you would then hit next, and then this is where you can pick who receives the messages. So you'd always want to use this add from existing contacts, and so this is where you can choose. Your group would either be ACT adults or ACT teens. So you would pick who you want to receive the message, and then this is the number that, these are the numbers then that would receive that message, and so you can make sure that that's looking right. And then you hit next. And this is where you can schedule your meetings, your messages to go out. So no, I don't want this to start immediately. My group doesn't start until October 7th. So I want this message to go out on October 8th. And I want it to go at 11 a.m. So this is where you can schedule. And so you'll do this for every message that you want to go out. And you can front load it. So you would set these dates for all of the messages for the 3 months you want them to go out. Then you hit next. And then this is where you actually enter the message. So I'm going to go back to our text messaging. And, perfect. Okay, and so this is then where you would enter the message. We can see here that that example message is a little bit lengthy. So you can see this is me typing in my free text here, but I only am allowed 150 characters. So that's why we're pre-creating these messages for you, so that you don't have to do a lot of this troubleshooting here with the size of the message. So we might have to scale this down a little bit so that it fits. So this is where you can make sure that the content is what you want, and that you can see how your recipients are going to receive that message. This is the preview over here of it. And then after you've done that, you hit next, and you can review. So I'm going to send text only. I've got, these are the people who it's going to, the date that it's going on, my message, and then I can hit submit. And so now I have that message already set up to go out on October 8th at 11 a.m. And then what my next job would be is to create that other message. So you go back to create a broadcast, go through the same process, pick a different date, maybe the same time, and so on and so forth. So that is how you enter the text messages. Let's open it up for questions. So you can either unmute yourself, or you can use the chat box right now to ask any questions about some of those logistical pieces.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
I thought I was, Bree?
Yes.
So this is Peggy. So you're gonna send all of this out to us so that we can review it? I don't see myself fumbling through this the first time or so.
Yeah, so we have written directions on how to go about inputting the message. So those will, that's all part of the follow-up. So yes, you'll have that step-by-step guide.
Okay, thank you.
I'm seeing a question from Thomas. Will the pre-written text messages be sent to our email so we can copy and paste them into the box? Yes, so we'll send you the electronic copy so that you don't have to retype all of the messages. So you'll get those sent electronically. Are there any other questions?
I don't think so. So this can happen from my computer at home?
Yes.
Or the computer at the Y if I have one?
Either. So it's accessible from any computer where there's internet. So,
Oh, is it in Spanish?
pardon me?
I will have Spanish-speaking participants. Are the
Mm,
messages also in Spanish?
that's a great question. You know, Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, but we only have the messages pre-populated in English at this point.
But Peggy, that's a great question. I think that I will talk with Patty, who's the director of our interpreter services at Children's, and she was also at the training. I could have that potentially remedied quickly, so I will work on that. And thank you for bringing that up. I certainly don't want to leave out our Spanish-speaking population at all.
Right, right. Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, great question, and that is absolutely something we would want to look into so that we can support that community as well. Are there any other questions about how to create those messages? What about comments? You know, in my opinion, it seems pretty user-friendly, but is that the same for, is that holding true for you all?
So are there people, does Lynette know how to do this, or somebody else in the Y at Mill Creek or at in Everett?
You know, Peggy, that's a great question. Let's touch base about it after the call because that's pretty specific. And so Mary and myself are the contacts for supporting this. So I can't speak for whether or not Lynette can do that, but you and I can touch base and make sure that you're feeling confident in being able to do this process.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We would definitely want to, be there for you and make it easy as possible. But we also want to guide you through the process and not just do it for you, because we'd hope that you will also be able to share with others and implement this in future programming and for all programs to eventually adopt this as it improves outcomes. So that's really important, and we want to teach you so that you can teach others as well, but we'll be there for you for sure.
Great, thank you.
All right, so that was some great discussion about the text messaging service and kind of how it works. My next comments are around implementation. So in the invitation for this webinar today, there was the application to receive funding from Seattle Children's to implement this program. So I've received some of those applications, but I haven't received them for everyone on this call, or at least the branches for everyone on this call. So I'll resend that application out today, and we'll want that to come back by tomorrow at the latest. And so you might want to talk with your branch coordinator on whether or not you've submitted that application, because that really will determine next steps in getting you a keyword and moving forward with creating your account. So you want to make sure you fill out that really brief application to opt in to receiving the funding and the support to implement this program. So I will send that out along with the instructions after this webinar today. So in terms of the management of the text messaging, there will be a point person who is responsible for inputting the text messages. You all being on this webinar today, you might be that point person since you're really having the most in-depth understanding of the process. But that is the goal, is that one person would be responsible for inputting the text messaging, so that there's not a whole lot of confusion around the scheduling or the messages that are getting input. It's best if there's just one person managing that. And if that's not you, talking with your coordinator about who that should be at your branch and who has the capacity to do that. Scheduling. So all messages should be put into the service in the beginning of the program. So that was something that Mary touched on, and that the approximate time frame is about an hour of input time. So you could see how quickly you can go through and input a text message and schedule it and go on to the next. So it's not forecasted to take much longer than an hour to do that, and how you would want to do that before your program starts. Yes. in terms of answering a question that came in just now about if we are sending messages in Spanish, what we would do is want to create a special keyword for folks who would be wanting Spanish messages, so that would create a separate contact bracket for them. So yes, we can specify. And lastly, so if you do need support in this text messaging, absolutely let Mary or myself know, and we are here to help support you in this implementation. You know, there are some nuances that might seem like challenges, but chances are we can work through it and figure out how to troubleshoot them, so that this can be just a standard part of ACT, and we can provide all of those added benefits that we discussed earlier in the webinar to our participants through adding in the text messaging service. So if you're struggling, or if this webinar is really feeling overwhelming, let's schedule an individual time to connect and chat through some of those challenges, because we want you to feel supported and we want you to feel like you're equipped to be able to do this. Let's see, Martin has a question. So if you're using a different program, you can still use the pre-made messages. So we'll make sure that gets sent to you, Martin. And then Katrina, I have received the email from Anne, so you're all set. So all right, so that then rounds us out. Oops. And so I'm wanting to open it up to Mary or the rest of the group if there are any additional questions about the text messaging service.
So, Aubrey, it looks like I have a, where am I? An application form. Should I talk to Lynette about that?
What was that? I'm sorry, Peggy, I didn't hear you.
Oh, should I talk to Lynette about the application for the for text messaging?
Sure, yes, that would make sense. So if you are not the branch coordinator, I would encourage you to talk with your branch coordinator.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions?
That's why we.
Well, I will go ahead and send a follow-up email. Okay. Somebody's having a lot of research, so if that's you, can you please end yourself from the call? So I will go ahead and send a follow-up email for the webinar today, and I just want to appreciate everybody for taking the time to be a part of it today. So we're here to support you as you embark on this important work.